If you have ever lived like this, working harder than the people around you, carrying more than they do, cleaning up more mess than they do, and still watching them receive more, then do not be too quick to call that bad luck. You may be doing more, you may be enduring more, you may even be more capable, and yet the raise goes to someone else. The promotion goes to someone else. The invitation into the important room goes to someone else. If that feeling is familiar, do not rush to blame fate. A lot of people are not undervalued because they lack worth. A lot of people are simply too quiet enough that the world eventually stops answering them. Frost Harbor was full of doors into the inner city, doors into the merchant halls, doors into ship contracts, cargo lines, private meetings, money, influence, and new names. They were heavy doors, iron-framed, wind-worn, bright from years of hands and bargaining. By day they opened and closed under the force of voices, requests, and negotiations. By night they stood still, like a row of cold sentries, watching the harbor wind move through the streets. The city had one rule that no one wrote down. Doors do not open on their own. Rian did not understand that rule when he was 29. He had worked in the largest shipping hall in Frost Harbor for more than 3 years. He was steady, accurate, reliable in the least glamorous way. Anything no one else wanted to handle ended up on his desk. Delayed manifests, broken routes, last-minute accounting chaos, the small ugly tasks that keep a system alive without making anyone look heroic. At first, he told himself this meant he was trusted. Later, he realized something else. Often, it only meant he was quiet enough to be used. There was another man who sat across from him. Neris, not as diligent, not as silent, not even as careful. Sometimes he looked almost casual, and yet somehow the better pay reached him first. The better rooms reached him first. The men upstairs remembered his name. What wounded Rian most was not the unfairness itself. It was the confusion. What exactly am I missing? I work more, I carry more, I finish what others avoid. So why does the door still open for him first? That winter, the harbor wind was brutal. One night, Rian stepped out of the shipping hall with a stack of cargo records in his arms and fingers stiff from cold. He did not go home. Instead, he kept walking until he reached an old street near the edge of the port. At the far end of it, a small tea house was still open. Inside sat an old man. On the table in front of him lay an old key, not decorative, a real key, the kind that had opened many heavy doors. Rian only meant to step inside for warmth, but as soon as he sat down, the old man said, "You look like the kind of man who is very good at suffering and still never gets invited inside." The line was so accurate that Rian froze. The old man poured him tea and then added, "You still believe that if you work hard enough, carry enough, and stay loyal enough, someone will eventually notice and open the door for you?" Rian said nothing, because that was exactly what he had believed. The old man smiled. "Then you may be waiting a very long time, because the world is very good at mistaking silence for lack of desire." The sentence landed badly, not because it was unkind, because it was true. The old man pushed the old key a little closer across the table. "This city's doors do not care how much you have suffered," he said. "They care whether you have a voice. If you do not knock, the people inside assume no one is there. If you do not ask, the system assumes you accept your place. If you do not speak, others will translate your silence as permission. He can bear more. He can wait. He does not need anything yet." Rian frowned. "So I should just start asking for things?" The old man shook his head. "Not exactly. Begging does not work. Complaining does not work. Vague hope does not work. What works is something much sharper. You have to knock. Then you have to speak clearly enough that the person inside understands why opening the door benefits them too." That sentence shifted something, because suddenly Rian saw that most of his frustration had one invisible flaw. He had assumed that value reveals itself automatically, but value that is never translated often stays trapped inside the person carrying it. The old man looked at him closely and said, "You have spent years treating silent effort as a bargaining chip, but the world rarely rewards silent effort by itself. The world often rewards those who know how to place their value directly on the table." Rian sat very still, because that line felt like truth, stripped of comfort. He had always believed that doing good work quietly was a kind of dignity. Now, for the first time, he saw that much of it had only been unpaid surrender. The old man told him that getting through a door usually begins with three things. First, knock. Second, define. Third, do not waste the echo. Most people fail at the first part, he said. They never knock. Then they call the world unfair. Others manage to knock, but they do it badly. They stand outside the door and say something like, "Please give me a chance." Who exactly is meant to respond to a sentence that vague? Rian finally asked. Then what does a good question sound like? The old man tapped the key once. It tells the person inside three things immediately: what you want, what you can bring, and why opening the door for you does not cost them more than it is worth. This is not begging, it is design. That word stayed with Rian, design, because he suddenly understood that he was not lacking value. He was lacking translation. The old man then told him a story from his own younger years. Once, he had been a nobody in the harbor, just a small supply runner, with no name anyone important knew, and yet he wanted access to the largest fleet line in Frost Harbor. Everyone told him it was impossible, so he asked anyway, not with flattery, not with desperation. He made one proposal: give me one small stretch of the route as a test. If I fail, your loss is minimal. If I succeed, you gain a supplier who is cheaper, faster, and far more hungry than the larger houses. That, the old man said, is what it means to ask at the bone, not to beg, to build an entry point that makes the other side pause and think. That night, Rian barely slept, not because he was excited, because he was seeing too much too fast. He began realizing that much of what he had once called discipline had actually been a kind of self-erasure. He believed silence would earn trust, but very often, silence only earns assumption. Assumption that you are fine, assumption that you can keep absorbing, assumption that you can wait longer, assumption that you are cheap enough to remain where you are. A few days later, Rian knocked on a door he had never imagined he would knock on before, the deputy director's office. In the past, he would not even have considered it, but this time he was not going there to vent, not to accuse, not to ask for recognition. He spent 3 nights organizing the real value of what he had done, and then studying one of the shipping hall's most broken routes, the North Frost Line. Unstable, expensive, full of delays, no one truly wanted it. The more he looked at it, the more he understood. This was his door. When he stood before the deputy director, he did not begin with everything he had endured. He did not say how many years he had served. He did not say how exhausted he was. He said, "I am not here to tell you how much I have suffered. I am here to propose an exchange." That sentence alone changed the room. The deputy director finally looked at him. Rian laid out the terms. 3 months. Give him the North Frost Line. He would bind himself to results. Timing, loss rate, error rate. If he brought the route inside the target range, he wanted a better share, an entry into higher level planning. If he failed, nothing changed. The office went quiet for a few seconds. They were long seconds, but not the old kind of long. Not the kind made of shame, the kind that happens when a mechanism begins moving. The deputy director did not agree immediately, but he did not dismiss him either. Instead, he started asking questions. Where is the biggest point of collapse? What will you do if the supply segment breaks? Who do you already trust enough to move with you? And in that moment, Rian finally understood. Doors do not open because you have suffered beautifully. They open when you say something clear enough to make action possible. In the end, the deputy director did not hand him everything. He only said, "Stabilize the line first, then we will discuss the rest." Years earlier, Rian would have walked away disappointed. Now he heard the deeper truth. That was not rejection. It was an entrance. The next 3 months, he gave himself to the North Frost Line completely. But unlike the years before, he was not merely absorbing chaos. He knew what he was building toward. For the first time, his labor was not only being spent to prove loyalty, it was being used to move his own life. He tracked every delay, every supply gap, every weak point, every avoidable loss, not out of fear, out of direction. And after 3 months, the North Frost Line held. The deputy director kept his word. Rian received the new share. And for the first time, he was brought into one of the rooms where decisions were actually made. But what changed him most was not the extra money. It was the realization that many things he had once thought were reserved for other people, had never truly been unreachable. He had simply never knocked. Or when he had spoken in a way that gave the world nothing solid to answer. Years later, someone asked him why some people work harder and still receive less. Rowan thought for a long time. Then he said, because many people use silence as proof of loyalty. But the world is not built to reward silence. If you do not speak, it assumes you do not want. If you do not define, it will never answer precisely. And if you do not listen to the echo of refusal, you will keep throwing away the information that might have opened the next door. This is Otherworld Radio. The step that changes a life is not always becoming more talented. Sometimes it is simpler than that. Sometimes it is the moment you stop hiding your desire. When you dare to knock, dare to define, and dare to receive whatever comes back, you stop being the man standing outside the door, wondering why other people seem luckier than you. You become the one who learns how to open it himself.